and we're going to get started. So I am Ellie, and I am the one doing these little educational chats for the Potomac River Jazz Club. For any of you in here, most of you know who we are, but anybody who doesn't, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year of bringing trad jazz to the DC area, supporting local bands and bringing some in from other places to do monthly concerts, jams, and some of these educational talks too that we started as we've been limited with the pandemic going on. We've got some really cool 50th anniversary stuff. Our own Dave Robinson, who's here on the chat, is going to do one of these for us in April about the founding of the PRJC, the roots of it, which will be pretty cool. We've got John Haas doing something a little later, either March or maybe later in the year, and more to come, and some really great concerts lined up. So definitely keep your eye on our Facebook feed or our website, prjc.org, and I'll send a little follow-up email out with anything that the presenters want to share. If there are any links or anything that you specifically want to point out, I'll send that out after, in addition to our website, so you can find us easily. So without further ado, I am going to hand over the talking to Judith and Reuben. Thanks for being here, you two.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, we're really delighted and honored to be here. I think the Potomac River Jazz Club has just done wonderful, wonderful work over the years in terms of preserving and playing and promoting traditional jazz. And of course, a number of the members have donated collections to the archives, and Ellie, Joel, and Dave Robinson has also stopped by with those tapes from Royal Stokes. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But when Ellie contacted me about this the series that you have, we thought it was a wonderful opportunity to provide background and information on the Felix E. Grant Jazz Archives, the collections that are housed there, our outreach initiatives, and also what we're doing to preserve and provide access to the materials in the collection. I think it's one of the greatest treasures, not only for the university and the city, but for the jazz community and the jazz related research world. I think it has a unique perspective because I think both because of its history and also because of its close affiliation with an active jazz performance program. So how did it begin? You know, we have the Felix Grant Jazz Archives. Well, Felix Grant, if you're a certain age from the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area and listen to jazz, you know Felix Grant. I mean, his distinctive voice was heard on the airways for close to 50 years. I'm probably preaching to the choir right now, but we'll just give a little background. You know, he began his career at WWDC in 1945. I think the station then was probably about 2 years old. And he said it was a great time to begin broadcasting. He did remote broadcasts. I think it was at the Club Cavacos, every Thursday evening. You had people like the Woody Herman Band, Nat Cole, Earl Gardner, that would come there. And he also became a fixture and a well-known face on at the jazz clubs on U Street, on 14th Street, and on 7th Street. He later moved to WMAL, and this is where most people remember him, where he had like a 30-year career with his album sound. And I'm going to bring Reuben in on this because he has some great stories, about Felix Grant.
Thank you. The first thing I'll say is I'm a radio nerd, and I began listening to radio when I was a kid. And this will make sense in a minute, but my brother had a transistor and radio, and when he'd fall asleep before I did, we shared a room about the size of Rhode Island, and I would take the radio, and they didn't call them earbuds in, but I would listen to announcers because I love the language. As a poet, you're listening to the way announcers spit, as the kids say now. And Felix was one of those people. Even before I met him, I thought, boy, it's like this distinctive, mellifluous stuff. Plus the music was, you could pretend you were in, Rio listening to Stan Getz, play choruses over Girl from Ipanema or what have you. But fast forward, when I was 18, I thankfully, inadvertently began doing radio in college. Uh, a friend had a show. I went to Goddard College, a little school in central Vermont, and a friend invited me on her program. It was Allen Ginsberg's birthday, and she said, "Well, could you just read some of his poems, and I'll put music under you?" So I did that. Long story short, I got hooked. She gave me the last hour. She said, "Well, I'll run the board. Just pick the music." And Felix comes in here. Even I met him that summer. This was 1975. But I think, like musicians, radio people have influences, and you end up like if you love Pee Wee Russell or clarinetists like that, you might try to play some of those licks until you find your own voice. So I would try and imitate people like uh, Felix and Rusty Hassan and people like that. And I would even say things like my show, which I eventually got was 8 till midnight. So I would say, this is Reuben Jackson on hand playing some music. Well, that's straight from Felix. Um, that summer, I came home, had a job, and I wrote him a letter. I was trembling when I wrote it because I thought he'll never answer. And I say, this kid's bothering me. So I'd like to come by the station. This is WMAL. It was on Jennifer Street. And talk to you about jazz and radio. So I mailed a letter. It's not like now, if I'd mailed it today, he'd have gotten it in July or something. But that next week, I'd come home from work. The phone rings. I'm upstairs, and my mother says, "There's somebody named Felix on the phone for you." And I'm thinking, it's not Felix Unger from The Odd Couple. Well, it's Felix Grant on the radio. And he says, "Well, I got your letter. Really great. When do you want to come by the station?" That was a Monday. I went that Friday, and, I stayed the entire time. And in between playing pieces, we talked about music and radio. And I knew a lot of this about his work at WRC because, we're talking about that. And I went a few more times that summer. He was very gracious. I'm like this music smitten, hyperactive 18-year-old person who's in love with like radio and jazz. So we stayed in touch. When I went back to school, I would write him and I would say, "Well, I just heard the new so and so, and here's what I'm playing this week." And he would write back and say, "Have you heard like there's a new Woody Herman on Galaxy Records or whatever?" And he recommend things. Well, I mean, what's greater than having someone with that reach and generosity? Your pen pals. And that next semester at Goddard, you had to do 2 non-resident terms. I did an internship at WRAL because, well, I wanted to learn other things about radio, but Felix was there. And so, of course, that's where I went. Ended up there, and he would give me albums and say, "Well, here's the new whatever it happened to be." And I would talk to him. I was like on him like lint on Velcro. Now, he was kind about that, as were other people like Bill Mayhew and Hardin Weaver and people like that, if you remember some of the morning people, 1976. So that continued. I graduated in 78, and, I came back to D.C., and I don't want to say, how people in DC sometimes say you're good friends with somebody, but we did remain friends. I'll use that term. And I never would have dreamt, though, that I would be working in a repository bearing his name, and to find out, the correspondence series of his papers, the letters some hyperactive radio smitten person had written. So it's a kind of nice full circle. And if I do interviews with people and they ask me about radio influences, of course, he's up there. And it was tough when he passed. He passed in 93, which is also when Dizzy Gillespie died and my father died. So like symbolically, it's like I lost 3 fathers in 1 year. But I mean, that's the story of our relationship in a nutshell. But it's just, it's sometimes things like with chord progressions, you'll invert something. Things will resolve themselves in a way you don't anticipate. But it's a great honor to work with, his materials, process materials, the materials you all have submitted. It's all, I think about the people I learned about before meeting Felix and musicians I've learned about since. I'm like a so-so pianist and guitarist, but I think the best thing I can do for these artists who've given me so much internally is to make their work available for people who are also smitten, as my mother used to say. Oh, Reuben, you're smitten with music. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, it was when I think this can be for another discussion, but Felix's career, it really gives you an insight into the history of radio in and what happened at WMAL. When you think for 30 years he had that show going, and then he was honored twice at the Kennedy Center. They did a program for the 20th anniversary and then the 25th anniversary. And right after the 25th anniversary, they tried to cancel the show.
Right.
And there was such an outpour of protest from the station that they had to reverse the decision. I think the general manager said that they made a huge mistake, a horrendous mistake, and they put it back on. But unfortunately, 5 years later, they canceled it without any warning. And after that, he moved to, this was, you see the move to talk radio, where sports and everything were taking, was sort of taking over. He moved to WRC after that, and was there, I think, until, and this is where you'd say, well, how did UDC come into this?
Right.
He was, Felix was on a committee. There was a committee, I think it was Barbara Nicholson and he were the co-chairs of it. And they were planning a citywide tribute to Duke Ellington. Of course, Duke Ellington and Felix were, this was one of his great heroes. It was supposed to be a citywide celebration in 1987. So several of the people, I mean, these were people, citywide that were on it, but several members from UDC were on it. And the general manager from WDCU, Edith Smith, was on the committee. Bobby Felder, who was a professor in the music program, and Calvin Jones, who was the jazz studies director at the, were on that committee. And out of that week of activities, two things happened. Edith Smith invited Felix to do his World of Jazz show on WDCU, and this was a thrill for him. First of all, he was so happy to be on an FM station. He was happy to do what he wanted to do and not be dictated in terms of what the programming was. And it was the last place that he worked. The other thing that came out of it was our Big Band Jazz Festival. Well, that started that year in 1987, and until COVID-19, which we had to postpone last year's, up until we've kept it going every year. So those two things came out of it. He moved to the WDCU FM, and it was the last place he worked. So this is how the connection happened. He decided to at this point he wanted to donate his materials to the music department. Bobby Felder at that time there decided to create an archive out of these collections. And then it just went on from there. So we started out with, the LPs and CDs, but most importantly, his interviews that of jazz artists that go over from some from WRC, but most of them, the majority of them are from the WMAL. And these were really the unique part of the collection. So this was back in, let's say 1987 that this started. 1988, he donated the materials. And so we had this Felix Grant collection. And of course, he was still working at the university. After he decided to do this, there's a wonderful clip I have, an interview that if we have a little bit of time to do it now, I wanted to, before we get into the collections. In 1990, they honored him at the university, for what he had done for the jazz community. I think the university, it was Blues Alley, and the committee to honor Felix Grant. And Renee Poussaint, remember Renee Poussaint that was on WJLA? She interviewed him, and it was a wonderful interview. I've just show a little bit of that if we can. we work with the volume here. Let me see.
I don't know why, but I'm feeling so sad.
The first time I ever saw Billie Holiday was very close to 14th and T, called Club Valley. She came over and sat down at our table. And the first thing she said was an expletive. But it was hilarious, and it was as natural as if she said, should we say grace? You know?
Felix has a lot of laughter and memories to share these days. Hundreds of his fans recently packed the theater at the University of the District of Columbia to pay him tribute. Pay him tribute with the music he loved, the music he brought to Washington radio listeners for over 3 decades, the particular magic of jazz.
Fans of jazz are a very special group of people themselves. They're unique. There's nobody like them in the world. It's great fun to be around them because we have something very, very much in common. We can talk Miles Davis or Duke Ellington or, you know, whoever it may possibly be. And you just, bam, right away. You're a pal, you're a friend.
And to listen to Jazz Night here in the nation's capital, Felix Grant on hand Saturdays.
Thousands of his friends tune in every Saturday afternoon, WDCU, to have one of those talks with Felix. They'd missed him. He'd been away, hospitalized for a while, fighting cancer. That physical struggle goes on, but the voice, that voice, it's as strong and mellow as ever.
But every time she appears here, there's a crowd that just comes to see if he's one of the best in the business.
Oh, good set with Red Holloway and Clark Terry. There's Jerry Wiggins, by the way, playing piano. Our original title, The Truth. You're now Benny Green.
It's the same voice that became a fixture in the homes, cabs, and clubs of post-World War II Washington. A voice that every weekday night on WMAL brought listeners into the small, smoke-filled clubs around the country and along 14th Street, where musical history was being made. Made by people who eventually would become his friends. People with names like Stuff Smith, Fat Waller, and Duke Ellington.
Usually years ago, 11:30 at night, things were really beginning to cook. And we even for a while had some after-hours clubs in town, which was another story again. You wish you were around in those days, because that was something. To start living at 1 o'clock in the morning was good fun.
The fun continued for 32 years on WMAL. Local artists found a home, as well as musicians on the cutting edge of jazz in places like Jamaica and Brazil. The rooms of his and his wife's Southwest D.C. apartment overflowed with records and tapes. It was a passion he'd harbored as a boy in New York, as a young soldier in the war, and through his first radio job at $37.50 a week. A passion tolerated but never fully understood by his bosses, who finally, despite a barrage of listener protests, after 3 decades, canceled his show.
All candor, the manager of the station was never fond of what I did. It was kind of I shouldn't say a laughing stock, but it kind of was. He was playing all that crazy stuff, and they had no feeling for the music whatsoever, and therefore felt it had no real value.
That's why this recent night at UDC was, for Felix Grant, particularly sweet. It wasn't just a celebration of the fact that he's found another radio home, or that he survived the disease that had threatened to kill him, but almost as importantly for him, that the music he's loved so long is alive and well and ready as always to be the centerpiece of smoke-filled rooms and after-hours joints where the party's only getting started at 1 a.m.
It sounds like at this stage, if they existed, you'd be ready to go again.
You better believe it. That's the first line.
Did I stop the share? Are we back okay?
Wow, that's great.
Are we still sharing or what?
No, you stopped the share, but there's still some background noise coming through. Maybe the feed might still be on.
I think I put the volume up. Let me put it down.
Yeah, there we go. You're good. Yeah.
Good.
Wow.
That's such a delight. And did you see your doctor there, Reuben?
Yes, Dr. Clark. Yeah.
Yeah.
So small town. So small town.
Yeah. That was what happened. Let's just go a little bit forward there. But you can see this is something that throughout his career that he said is that the station managers had very little respect for the music. In fact, they, with the recordings, they were like, oh, put it. That's why a lot of them, he took them, they practically gave them. They didn't even want them in the library. They didn't even want the recordings in the library. It's strange, real strange. But anyhow.
One thing I want to just quickly say about Felix's importance, which we all are aware of, but he was on, when he was with WMAL, that was an AM station. And of course, after a certain point, AM radio primary focus. I mean, you had, top 40 news at the top of the hour, that kind of thing. And MAL was kind of semi-variation on a theme, but he was, I mean, for those of us who loved his wonderful, it was an anomaly to management. And I'm not doing this to impugn, management or what have you, but even as an intern, you could feel that. And for me, it's like you're 19 or whatever. I want to just tell them, don't you know what a treasure you have? I think they kind of did and kind of didn't. I mean, I remember just taking cabs going somewhere, and you get in a cab, you knew the cab driver was okay if he or she would say, like I was asking somebody for directions once, sorry, Felix is on. And it was never Felix, it was Felix. And so it's like this whole, he had the pulse in the hearts of people. And that was always, it was an accolade. But yeah, I think there was some disconnect. But doing that on AM radio that's a huge thing. Very huge thing.
Yeah, he had and I would hear this from the musicians too, the great respect he had for musicians and for the music. That was his love of music. This one, and whatever he did. So that was the start, Felix's collection. And after he passed in 1993, his wife, June, continued to, we had recordings, we had the interviews, but she continued to donate a lot of the archival materials here that are really the photographs, the programming. I mean, just a wealth of material that we have. You'll see a little bit in the digital collection that we have of that. And then around 1993, the administration, right now it was just, we had a suite of rooms for it, and it was enough to accommodate what Felix's collection was. But the 1993, they called the Jazz Studies program to sort of oversee, to guide the development of the archives, and also to coordinate the different, activities that we would do that are designed to bring the archives resources to a wider public, because this was always part of it, that it would be not only a research, but a resource center as well. So this is when living in Washington, D.C. being in Washington, D.C. was just so wonderful, because you had access to some of the greatest minds, the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian, all of the, to benefit from the expertise of the people in the institutions. And of course, Calvin Jones, the first person he called was Reuben Jackson. And Reuben Jackson met with us with John Fleckner from the Smithsonian. And then Reuben asked us to bring Larry Applebaum into it from the Library of Congress. And, this was the beginning of, getting the best minds in this, in this world to work with us. And Larry came and did a consultantship for pro bono, just because he loved the idea of an archives, and gave us a way to start approaching this. And of course, the first thing he said was, those, the interviews were the most unique part of the collection. So we began to transfer those. I won't say digitize, because, back in 1993, that, the digital, there were no, every Library of Congress was still preserving on reel-to-reel.
Yeah.
So, what we did was the initial thing was transfer them from the reel-to-reel tapes, which were fragile, into cassettes. And then, of course, later on, we went to digitize them. So that was the beginning. And then 1997, we started getting collections just because of, Felix's reputation. A lot of people started, his personal friends started donating. And then in 1997, with the tragic loss of our radio station, WDCU, all of the materials, that's the first thing we did when we heard about this. Calvin and I went to the president, vice president, and said, please, these materials should be part of the archives. So now we have not only Felix's, but these other collections, plus the WDCU, which was besides all the commercially issued recordings, you had the same type of archival materials, a lot of photographs, a lot of, business records, a lot of program notes, a lot of just publicity material from the different artists. So it was quite a huge collection. So at this point, space was an issue. And at this point, I approached the dean, the director of the library of the Learning Resources Division, Albert Casiero, and he immediately saw the value of the collection. We were so fortunate that he was there, and he redesigned a space of where we are now in the A level of Building 41, which was the library, and we moved there. And then the other thing that we really benefited from at this point was not only we had the Jazz Studies program, we had the College of Arts and Sciences, but we now have the library with us. And with the library came the Washington Research Library Consortium, which was probably one of the best things that ever happened. I mean, to have the support of this resource sharing institution. So the first thing we did, now this was in 2000, and by this time now we started, digitizing the interviews. And once again, with the expertise of Mike Turpin, who was at the Library of Congress, but worked with Rachel Elwell, who was, worked with me in the archives. And that was the first project we had, was to make those accessible. And we created a website at that point, and they were the first things that we had, since they were the things that most of the, researchers were interested in because nobody else had them. And I'll show you a little bit about that in a minute. And then the next thing in 2002, we brought Reuben back, and with Rachel and Reuben and myself, we had the second part of the digital collection, which was basically all from Felix's collection. And we'll show you a little bit of that. And this is the beginning. So we have these two major collections and then these other ones that have come in. And then it just started from there. If you can see how it has grown. We'll go on and talk a little bit about what has happened after that. 2006, Paul Anthony, another radio broadcaster, gave a collection of recordings and interviews, another incredible collection of interviews, which we've digitized. Ernest Dyson, who was at Voice of America, his collection. And by this point, we needed more space. And once again, the library came through, and with the capital improvement funds, we were, we renovated it. We now have compact shelving for the LPs, for the CDs, more space for archival materials. We need more at this point too, but at least this was a start. And then in 2006, we had an open house to celebrate the new facility, which at that point was really state of the art. We were really fortunate once again to have the support of the administration of the library, the Washington Research Library Consortium. So we had the website up, and I got a call in 2007 from a researcher, Michael Fitzgerald, who was he was a musician, but went and decided to go ahead and get a library degree, and his master's thesis was on jazz archives in the United States, and we were one of the ones he chose. Of course, you immediately think of the Institute of Jazz Studies and several others, but he chose us because of what we were doing in terms of giving access to the materials. So all of these things that happen, they happen like divine providence or divine order for a reason. After he finished his degree, and this is Michael is a musician as well, also wrote the biography of Gigi Grice. He's a discographer. He has a great background in this music. He came after he finished school, was looking we had a position opening in our library, the electronic services librarian, and he fell into that position in 2009, and he's been here with us ever since, and of course working very closely with the university. And because of him, he initiated a lot of other, brought in a lot of other collections, the Herb and Will Friedwald collection. You might be familiar with Herb Friedwald, I think, with the New Orleans collection, connection, because he was, the collection itself is traditional jazz and avant-garde jazz. There's about 10,000 albums that we have with that. But he was also very important in, he studied at Tulane University. This was, Will Friedwald, the writer, but Herb Friedwald was a very influential in Preservation Jazz Hall Band, really the founding. He was a participant in really a key participant in the founding of Preservation Hall. He worked with. I'm reading from a thing here because he acted in the jazz revival of the late 50s and 60s. He worked with Richard B. Allen in the early years of the William Ransom Hogan Jazz Archive. So all of this, now we have this collection here, and that was the beginning too. Royal Stokes at that point came in. I mean, Royal's collection is ongoing. His just a tremendous books, of CDs, of archival, all of his personal papers. So you can see it's, and then of course, Dave, remember when you dropped off all of the reel-to-reels? Yes. It's a tremendous collection. And every year, except for this year, either his son or his wife drops off more materials. This is, that have come in. And if you know how active he says, I have one of his last book that came out. You have his reader. He's just amazing. So we'll go over some of the collections, but right now I just want to show you a little bit about what we're doing with the interviews and the digital collection. And then also, with this, the outreach, because in addition to all of these collections that are coming in from the outside, and in a minute I'm going to have Ellie talk about one major one that we have. Yes, you have to. But in addition to that, what's important to us too is that we're documenting the history of jazz at UDC too, as well. I mean, we have our Jazz Alive series, we have our Jazz Forum series, which right now we have, I think, 59 of those that we've produced over that started in 2009, particularly after Mike came on board. The first one we did was with Andrew White, who just passed, and the second one was with Will Friedwald. And I'm just going to, if we're going to share the screen again, I want to show you a little bit about the digital collection and also how you all can have access to it, to the materials. They're open. First start from here. This is the website, which you can have access to the different, give a little information about it, about the Felix grant. And here, this is certainly not complete. We're not up to date, but some of the things that aren't in the main are inventoried here, so you can get a little bit of idea of what some of the things that are in the collections. The LP, the inventory, CD inventories. But with the digital collection, I'll get here in a minute. Let me go back over here first. Let's go to the radio interviews. They were the first ones we have, which are part of the digital collection. You can see the list. And you can, if you just go to jazzarchives.org, and I'll send this to Ellie. And this will lead you into any of the, to the digital collection. But for instance, if you were interested in, there's Danny Barker, there's I always love Cannonball. I'll do it. There's the interview. You also have the entry there, the interview, and also, he plays selections. I'll just a tiny bit of that.
Very pretty song from a collection featuring not only Julian Adderley, but also a Brazilian pianist of some consequence by the name of Sergio Mendes. Cannonballers are...
I'll let you, let me stop the share here. This is just, you know, you'll have a lot of fun going through and listening to some of these. If you go back to, let's go to browse here, just to see, these are the digital collection, the archives. Now we're in the process of, well, Felix collection, we're in the process of now getting all of our Jazz Forum collection up. But for Felix's collection, there's just such, I mean, the photographs, let's see if we, here we go. We have the different series here. Let me just show you one thing that I'm always, I know this, and Reuben, you can talk a little bit about this, the Lorton Jazz Festival that went on in Virginia for, from the late 50s to 60s, that was a major, this was done just for the inmates.
Inmates, right.
Yeah, they had, there's Ella Fitzgerald. I think the first one was with Sarah Vaughan. I mean, right. They had there's, I'm going to show you here. I love this photo. Oscar Peterson, Ed Thigpen, Ray Brown. Yeah. You see the inmates in the back. So there's a lot of history here that people aren't aware of, that this was done. And of course, Felix was involved with this. That's how we have this. And also, oh, who was the Crystal Caverns and the Bohemian Caverns?
Bohemian Caverns, right.
The older I get, I'm getting so bad with names. And I know this, the person who used to do all the booking there. Anyhow, he was involved in bringing a lot of these, you know, the artists here. There's a nice, if you get a chance, this commemorative booklet will give you history on the festival and also get an idea of some of the people. But there are Frank Sinatra, Count Basie, right. Just amazing what they had. And it was just, and they came, this was done, you know, gratis. They weren't paid for this. They came to do this particularly just for the inmates. So that's something that a lot of people aren't aware of at the, you know, the Lorton Jazz Festival. Sure. So you have, let me go back here. So you'll have fun going through that too. Their programs, awards that he got. And also what you'll find here too is so much information on Brazil, on what he did in terms of promoting Brazilian music. In fact, we were asked, I'm going to stop this share for a minute and then go back to that. We were asked in, I guess it was in 2014, the Strathmore did a week of samba. It was the celebration of the recording, and we were asked to do an exhibition based on, you know, the materials that we have in the collection, and because Felix was very instrumental in introducing Brazilian music to the United States. In fact, Charlie Bird said that he first heard it, you know, with Felix. Felix was playing the music in the 50s, long before, you know, they took the 1961 trip to Brazil, before Charlie Bird was there. He would find recordings of Bonfa and Maísa and was playing them on the air. And the Brazilian population in Washington at that time, the João Santos, who was head of the coffee agreement, was there, and he was so taken by it, he introduced him to his brother, Paulo Santos, who had this, this almost the same type of job in Brazil that Felix had. He was a broadcaster and radio announcer. And he came and brought more. He did an interview and brought more of the recordings, you know, of what was happening then, which was the Bossa Nova, you know, movement. And Felix started going there in '61 and went there regularly. And he became a much beloved person with with the Brazilian musicians. And you'll see we have the interviews of Sergio Mendes, of João Gilberto, Lenny Andrade. So you can see those as well. Do you have any, Reuben, any comments on that?
Well, you know, I was thinking about the impact of this material from, well, I'll call it the reference end. And what you see, as an archivist, of course, there's the nitty gritty, get your hands dirty and get collections up and processed for people to access. But as the research community continues to explore the impact of jazz and jazz influenced and jazz inspired music, I note the sort of the arc of conversation with researchers. And as this has continued, we get many more queries, even now with COVID, I get a lot of email queries and I had like 3 phone conversations today from people who are or have become aware of the impact of things like, say, the Lorton Jazz Festival, and a lot of things recently concerning Brazil, the Bossa Nova, I'll use it as kind of an umbrella term, and Felix's importance in, I'm a Southerner, I said importance here, that first syllable, familiarizing us with that music. And I'll tie that in again to the fact that this was on AM radio, just as, he played Bob Marley and stuff in the 70s on AM radio, WMAL, and you listen to songs like Lively Up Yourself. So I wanted I wanted to mention that because that is part and parcel of this job, which I like a great deal. And the other part is something Felix said earlier in the feature. There was Renee Poussin about jazz fans. I mean, I know you all are. What usually happens with me on a given day, someone will call, like a guy called last week looking for information about a Swedish trombonist named Aki Persson, who died, I think, back in the mid-'70s. He's looking for a particular album which happened to be in the Will Friedwald collection. So he wanted the liner notes, and I said, oh, sure, I can scan these for you. But what happens is if you're lucky, I can answer the question or at least refer them somewhere else. But so there's the question itself, and then there's maybe 20, 30 minutes of conversation related to, because this conversation in particular, we started talking about Sweden, and I told him, well, I'd spent 2 weeks in Stockholm meeting with donors and like food and clubs, and it's all related to, the music. So the music, as we know, has impact. So, literally you think about Felix's impact and that generating interest or deeper interest in researchers. And, selfishly, there's like this wonderful interaction I think we have with each other, particularly since, what we love is not necessarily mass market. So, I'm going home and I'm beaming because I get to talk to somebody about, a trombonist or a drummer or the whole idea of Felix, and his impact on this city. And because I think the understanding of the depths of the city's role in the development of music, it's getting better. It wasn't always, people kind of gave it short shrift because it wasn't New York. But I see it from, it's like being a coach as opposed to being a player. And you see these things, and this is kind of a second cousin answer, but that's part of the joy of this. But making note of how, just like the music, the scholarship has its own trajectory and tempo.
Yeah, we get requests. I just had over the weekend a researcher from London who's doing his dissertation and study on Brazilian music, but particularly the influence that the jazz ambassadors had, sending, the United States sending musicians to Latin America. Of course, we know why they did, but and he was so thrilled to have that. I mean, we get, particularly with the Brazilian thing, thrilled with all of the information we had, and not just what we have online, but what we have from interviews of Felix, and also just a lot of recordings and just a wealth of information that we have on it. We have, if you, I'm not going to do this too, but I also want you to I'm going to share the screen real quick too to show you this. We still have, what is it? This Bossa Nova project. This was based on the exhibition that we did that you have access to too, that's still online. And these are little mini exhibits that give you background on how it came here, on Felix's, that are still, we still have up there, and photographs that have to do with that. So that's another thing I want you to be aware of. And I'll send that link, Ellie, through you to the website for that. So it's the Bossa Nova exhibition. But we get requests, and Reuben can say this, either telephone or a lot online, email, not just for the interview. Sometimes that's the way they find us, but then, or through the Brazilian thing, but then, requests from all over the world.
Right.
So it's, and then I'll say a little bit more, when you look now at the collections that we have, besides John Hassey from the Smithsonian donated collections, George Hall, who was a discographer that lived in I think in Maryland, close to Baltimore. His collection was just incredible of LPs and 78s. And after he passed, he didn't want it broken up. His wife didn't want it broken up. She wanted it in one place. So we literally transported all of those to the archives, and that had about 10,000 LPs and 10,000 78s, and they were in really pristine condition. Then things that locally, Ronnie Wells and Ron Elliston, their collections, plus things from the East Coast Jazz Festival. All of these, so it's not just commercially issued recordings, all of the archival materials that we have. Maurice Jackson, historian who, that's the other thing I wanted to mention. There's that DC Jazz book that we have. There's a chapter of UDC on it, and also researching jazz. Has some good information in it. But then there's another collection that came in, and I want Ellie to speak to it just a little bit, the Gene Hyde, just briefly, because this is, oh my God, what a wealth of material is in there of photographs, which are, I tell you, when people come, that's one of the first things that they go, the photographs are just really hit people, and he has not only from the local ones from Washington, they go back to the 79, 80, but in New Orleans, and he took pictures of everyone. Can you just tell us a little bit about it? Because this was...
Oh, I'll do a nutshell version of it. Gene Hyden was a member of the PRJC for some time, and when I took over the newsletter, he did contribute some photos for the newsletter several occasions, and he and I struck up an interesting friendship. Sometimes he'd call when I was on my way driving home from work, and I'd, have the cell phone, the headphones in, driving. And he was just a really crazy, cool character. And some of you guys I know probably know him or knew him. But when he died some years ago, sadly, his collection of photography, which he had some from Hawaii, some from DC, some from New Orleans, where he had lived at different times in his life. And his family had put that into a storage unit that had sadly gone into arrears. Somebody did a Storage Wars thing, and bought it at auction. And they saw the Potomac River Jazz Club stuff in there. My contact info was in with it, and they got in touch with me to try to sell the collection. And what was actually special and strange about all of that was that the couple who had purchased it realized how special it was. They could have pulled out a handful of things where they could have made some money that would have paid for their trouble. But realized that most of it wasn't really sellable, particularly in Kansas, where they were easily, and realized that it should. The woman said, "This should be in a museum somewhere. I don't know what to do with this. We have to make our money back, but this belongs in a museum somewhere." And boy, it took I don't know. It was close to a year, maybe, of negotiations. They kept thinking they could get more money and get more money. And I knew it would cost a lot of money to move it, much less buy it. And so anyway, I was able to secure it. I drove to Kansas to pay them in cash, and they put they had the storage thing locked, like one of those cubes, and the truck, came in to pick up the cube, and I got the keys, and off I went. I was there for 24 hours and flew home, and I'm like, okay, I've got to do something with this. I can't keep all this in my house. And through the PRJC connections was put in touch with Judith, and that's how I passed that on. But going through all these pictures and some of the guys on right now came over to my house and helped me. We were trying to put names to some of them and organize, and the collection was just amazing. I mean, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures in that. So I was really happy to put it in somebody's hands where it would be taken care of and accessible. Yeah.
And I say this because what's so important is that, that you were there, Ellie, to do this, but there's so many, how important it is for people. Like sometimes families don't know a lot of times the value of certain things. And it's before, so many times things have just been discarded, thrown out, and not knowing the value of it. And the fact that you were there to do it is so important. And we really encourage, we tried to do a thing a while back called Do You Remember? Just trying to get, information from, because jazz fans are amazing. They're the ones who are the real history of this music. The ones that I see them sometimes at Westminster they go every Friday night. They're there. They love the music, and they're the ones that really know it. And sometimes they have materials. We did and they did collect them. If you have things that you want to give to the archives, or just have them scanned or digitized to keep them. But it's so important that that people like you are out there to recognize the value of that, because it's just an extraordinary connection. He has everybody in it. Yeah, so that's important, but that's one of the major ones. And just a little bit more, the Capital City Jazz Festival that went on for that Karen Spellman and Bill Brower did in the early. That was just an amazing one. We have all of those, the documents there and recordings. I was talking about Maurice Jackson, but he gave a wonderful collection of Cuban albums that were, rare, really rare albums. They're there. And then Tom Scanlon, who also lived in the Washington area, an amazing collection. I had to go there. They were moving into a retirement home, and his whole, he was another one. He wrote for Downbeat and other, I think, where was it? Voice of America too. He did a number of shows. Right. I went to their house every weekend for, I don't know, I mean, it was like for a year to pack up the, the recordings, the LPs of that, and then bringing, you remember Stu, my Stu from the music program with his, the truck where we put things on that. So that was every weekend for a year, just packing up that material and bringing it. But it was I always say a labor of love. Yeah, exactly. So we have that, and then William Brower. And then all of the materials that we've been collecting just from, I said, the Jazz Studies program, the wealth of materials we have there from the, just the concerts. We have the Jazz Forum series. We have the Meet the Artist on the Bandstand that Alan Johnson started. I'm going to do another share screen real quick to show you what we're doing with some of these things too. We have a YouTube channel where you can access these right now, but we really want them eventually part of the digital collection. I have to get out of Bossa Nova here. Where are we? Yeah. Isn't that a great picture? Yeah. So with the Jazz Forum, we're working with cataloger in the library. Let me just show you a little bit here that in 2009, I think we have the Will Friedwald one. So we have the flyers, the photographs, the audio recordings, but these aren't open to the public yet, but we'll be there. But for instance, there's Will Friedwald.
Greetings and thank you for coming to our second Jazz Forum event, presented by the Felix E. Jazz Archives, the University District of Columbia. My name is Mike Fitzgerald. I'm the Electronic Services Librarian at UDC, and we're pleased to have with us someone who I've known professionally for many years and who recently became a very good friend of the Jazz Archives here. Will Friedwald is a noted jazz critic who has written 7 books on music and popular culture, including the autobiography of Tony Bennett, The Survey Jazz Singing, and Stardust Melodies, which tells the history of 12 of America's most popular songs.
Okay, I know we don't have time, but I want to give you an idea. These are about 2-hour sessions that are there. So it will be open to the public soon. Some of them we already have on YouTube, but they're going to be part of the digital collection. And I think Paul Anthony we have there, but there's also those that haven't been there. I'll show you because these are some photographs that I'll show you the inside of the archives right now. There we go. Here you can see the compact shelving. Soon as I open this up for the, there's some LPs. There's for his father's collection. And that's, of course, I to see Mike Fitzgerald. And there's Cheryl Hawkins, who's with this is the other thing, we have our UDC TV station, and we've worked really closely, particularly with Cheryl. A lot of our shows are broadcast on their channel and also on their YouTube channel. So, yeah, so you can see, and that's what I've been working on for this past few weeks, getting these things to the catalog or enough. But we have Paul Anthony too, I believe, is up to this. We'll see a little bit. Our theme song. Anyhow, you know, and I won't time, but these are things that you can access. Let me stop the share here right now. That you'll be able to access now. And as I said, if you go on the website too, go to the YouTube channel, which the link is there. You'll see a lot of the performances, some of the Meet the Artist on the Bandstand, and then some later ones that we haven't gotten into the digital collection, but ones that Reuben did a wonderful jazz forum with. Come on, Reuben.
Maxine Gordon.
Gordon, yeah, Dexter Gordon's wife. She's just that did it at Politics and Prose, but then we did one at the TV station, and then also brought her back to this was first about the book that had come out, which is an extraordinary book, but the also her career, which is really, really, really interesting, and she came back the next year to do that. So both Reuben and Rusty Hassan and Michael have been working, you know, and doing these, you know, the interviews that we have for the Jazz Forum. And then our head of our jazz studies program, Alan Johnson, has been initiated this jazz at the Meet the Artist on the Bandstand, and that's been really successful. And it's good because you get it's conversation and performance, so it's a combination. He gets to interview the artist, and also, you know, they perform. And you always write something special for the person. So it's really, you know, a wonderful collection. And it has some of the, he's mainly musicians from this area. So you'll get a wide range of, you know, James King and Nasser Abadie, and a wide range of musicians. So that's the as far as accessing the digital collection. What we're working on now is more space. We need more space, and Reuben can probably tell you a little bit more of what he's doing. I mean, it's with this pandemic.
I'm trying to stay sane. I'll be brief there. No, I go in usually twice a week for about 4 hours, and it's the lifeblood of our repository is certainly the collections, but volunteers do so much with. There's a lot of unromantic work in archival, like taking old paper clips off of photographs or documents and creating preliminary inventories, putting things into rough order. The first law of archival work is arrangement precedes description. So helping to get things in some order, rehousing things, placing them in acid-free folders, blah, 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 that kind of thing. Because we can't have people on campus. I mean, I'm still doing that. But it's it's the difference between having a quintet and one musician, which is not a complaint. But I'm doing the same things with. I just finished some materials, organizing some materials by the guitarist Bill Harris, who lived here. He, if you knew the Pigfoot Jazz Club, it's a small collection. But it's fascinating, and I don't want to, give the story away because of time. But you do learn things in the process of collecting, in the process of processing. Forgive the redundancy there. So, but it's most of my job is, it is the nitty gritty stuff. Getting things in order to create guides, and like I said, there are more. I mean, I never lived through a pandemic, but we have a lot of phone calls, when I'm there. And it's one of the nicest things I heard from someone recently. Was this guy called from New Jersey, and I can't remember his question, but he said, a buddy of mine said, there's this guy in DC who works for Felix Grand Archives. He probably knows the answer to your question, or he knows where to direct it. And I said, that's like a music nerd. That's like the greatest compliment in the world. So questions and talking to the jazz fans that Felix gave a shout out to earlier, those are my days, and the rest is like, you just want to get home safely. But yeah, that's it. I mean, the work continues, and you do what you can given these what's they say on the news a lot, these unprecedented circumstances,
Yeah. These challenging days.
Yeah. The new normal. I don't know. I don't want to, for music built on originality, I don't want to spout cliches all night, so I won't.
We get so many, it's amazing, the requests to say, like, I used to listen to Felix, or I was like in school, in high school, when I used to listen to Felix, and how many people really remember him. And I think it's a great, tribute to him and what he did in terms of what he did. He really understood the city. He understood the city in terms of the levels of it, the local, the international, the national level. And even though he was internationally acclaimed for his connection with and promoting Brazilian music, he had a really keen interest in local history and this connection to the community. I mean, he was influential in the changing the name of the high school to the Duke Ellington School for the Arts. They had this picture of the Duke Ellington Bridge. He was there. He and this is in the archive too. He found out where the birthplace of Duke Ellington in Washington D.C. It was right behind Blackie's House of Beef, and it's a post office now. But he convinced I think at that time it was still owned by the owner of Blackie's House of Beef. And he convinced him they put a plaque on the building. It's still there. If you walk by the post office, it says the Duke Ellington building. And the photographs are in the collection, in the digital collection. His son came down for the dedication, which unfortunately, this is something that Felix had worked on for his he had pictures of all the places where Ellington lived. But he was in the hospital at that time, but his wife was there, and they had we had the UDC Jazz Ensemble was, played, and they dedicated the building, and you can go and the plaque is still there. It's a post office. It's a post office now, but it has the Duke Ellington building. So it's the amazing things that he did in his connection with, I'd say, the local community, all the awards he had, he was just really really part of this city. And it's just amazing at how many people still remember him. As I said, of a certain age. But he was he really started, and along with Bobby Felder, who really had the idea to really start this archive. So we started with this collection, and we see where we are now. I mean, it's just it's really incredible. And I'm very optimistic. I think we've always had the support. I think they've always recognized the value of what this art form is, to the city. And I think we're going to keep on growing. I intend to, even when I retire, to sort of keep an eye on it and stay on the board. You know how that is, you board members, right? And make sure that things are, and hopefully Reuben's going to be around there for a while. By the way, you have to, Reuben had quite a career, before he left the Smithsonian and went to Vermont, was teaching, but also had a radio show in Vermont. And tell them about the shows that are now going to be part of the collection at the Library of Congress. This is something that'll be wonderful.
Okay. I'll be succinct. Well, I had a show on Vermont Public Radio from 2012 until early 2018, Friday Night Jazz, and the what is it? It's called the Archive of Public Broadcasting. It's a collaboration between the Library of Congress and WGBH, and they requested, someone from the archive called me and said we're interested in some of your shows. I thought they said some of your shows. I said, well, you should contact the station and tell them. But they said, no, well, we want the entire run, which floored me, because I figured, you want like a representative sampling. And so long story short, VPR from my public radio, said sure. And they, sent them files, and they're in, well, when things reopen again, everyone is interested, you can go to the division. It was at the broadcast, or whatever it's called, recorded sound division, and you can look up shows. And I mean, the records, the catalog records are online, but because there's some stuff between lawyers, and some of the collections they have, you can access, well, like interviews, like with Felix Grant, but with mine you can't. And I think there was some discussion between the library and some lawyers, and then COVID hit. So, but it is a real honor, I just, and it's part of Felix in all this, because of that youngish kid who asked all the questions. And it's, so that's it. Yeah. I went once just to listen, and I'm highly self-critical. So it was tough. But it's also, it's quite an honor. And I thought about Felix and all my other influences, and scratching my father's, jazz albums when I was a kid, because I'd play him to death, and I'd say, what do you want for your birthday? He'd say, well, you see this Louis Armstrong from Symphony Hall, yeah, I need another copy because you scratched it. So it's all been like this. I've just been chasing music most of my life, and that's just another, I think, fortunate circumstance.
We are so fortunate to because when you say archivist, what's important in this case is not so much that you have the technical things, that how to catalog or this or that. The important thing is that you know the music, that you understand the content of the archive. And we're really fortunate that you know, Reuben is there, and that everyone we've had really has, that's the primary requirement for this. You know, so if we have any questions, I don't know if there are any questions. Yes.
I have
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I have a quick one, but I don't have to be first.
Joel?
Sure. I went in last night to do some homework, and I found this delightful hour of Felix interviewing a guy from the new skiffle band, Tony Haggard, I think, or Haggard. And it was delightful, and it reminded me of what a great broadcaster Grant was. He had he had it just, it came out of his fingertips. It was so natural and amazing. And I say that because that was my field. And at 9 years old, I wanted to do what he did. But it's a good thing I didn't, because I would have been selling pharmaceuticals today.
But you have a great voice. Doesn't he have a great radio voice?
He did.
You do.
Well, yeah, I was so good at that, they put me in management. But my question is, besides what you see clicking here and there on the website, how do people access what's in the collection?
Well, right now, I mean, normally we have appointments, you know, people come to the archives and do it, but right now what they can do is tell us if they're interested in something particular, and then we can usually scan the material or get the information together and email. Or what I do is retransfer. That's what I usually use to do it. That's what we're doing remotely now. But normally you can make an appointment, you know, when the campus is open again, and when we're through with this COVID, hopefully soon. You can come and you know, we have research where you can come and research.
That, I think, you know, less is more, but a little outline on that would be of use to our Potomac River Jazz Club members.
Well, I think on the on the website there is a part there that tells you how to, you know, what to do as far as appointments, you know, to do, you know, where you can contact and how to make an appointment. It's just right now we don't have any in-house appointments. Most of the thing is done virtually. Sure. So by email, telephone, or whatever.
Yeah, when we are more in precedented, Reuben.
Yes, there you go.
My question, I remember when you all were getting stuff from me, and you mentioned something about needing more space. One thing I thought was really interesting was you had told me that because you had this connection with the library system, that you do have access to storage space that you would never have had otherwise. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And I just thought maybe you could just briefly explain that.
Well, that we also, with the Washington Research Library Consortium, we do have, you know, for instance, once we've digitized materials, and you know, they can be stored there. So we do have space there. We also have space within the library where they're allocated outside of where our you know, where the facility is itself. We have something on other floors where, you know, where the library is associated, but they're doing a lot of renovating right now. So we're in the midst of, you know, hopefully getting, you know, more space, and there's some other things that are happening too that, you know, I don't want to say right now, but, you know, it looks promising. But as I say, the Washington Research Library Consortium has also been a great asset. I mean, we do use that for some storage, but mostly the things that are there are for, you know, for things that we've already been through. Let's say Felix's reel-to-reel tapes can go there now.
Any questions, folks?
Hi.
You all look so relaxed.
My name's Beth. I'm with my husband, Rick. I just wanted to introduce myself. Joel Albert introduced us to you over the summer regarding Al Weber's collection. He was actually connecting Al's daughter, Jenny Weber, to you for his collection of albums and Potomac River Jazz Club paraphernalia. He was a co-founder of the club. And I just wanted to say hi. We talked on the telephone, but it's nice to see you in person.
Yeah, that's always, you know, in person.
Yeah, as good as we get right now.
It's great to see anybody in person.
Yeah.
2021 in person.
Yeah, 2021 in person, yes.
I know.
It's just like being there.
That's great. That's a great connection. Yeah.
So I'm going to chime in. I'm going to chime in here. I'm the archivist for the Potomac River Jazz Club. Hi, Dave. How you doing? Hi. So, and I knew Al Weber, played many, many gigs with him, and he was a good buddy. So, what you said something about archival materials concerning the club. Are these now resident at the Grant Archives, or are these things you're looking for a home for, or
Jenny,
what? I'm the archivist for the club, so I try to scoop all that kind of stuff together.
Yeah. That's awesome. Jenny has all of those things in storage. Mariana, Al's wife, passed away earlier last year, as you know, so she was going through the house in Al's expansive office, and she came up with a great many more materials, I think, than she had anticipated from his early days writing with the club, articles and things. So there could definitely be things that you'd be interested in. I'd be more than happy to connect her with you so that she could talk more specifically. She was the one who actually was putting all those things into storage over the summer. So we saw them before they were packed up, but I don't know what kind of an inventory that she made specifically. And her wish, as all of us, I think, is just to try to keep the collection together or with people who care about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why don't you outline a little bit about the fund? Because that came to the fund and we just don't have the resources.
Exactly. So we started a jazz fund in Al's honor after his death, that it resides in a community foundation in Loudoun County. And we, like you, do not have any space to keep such a collection. It'd be awesome to have it. I'm listening to you all talk, Reuben and Judith. I thought, man, what a cool thing. We should just start our own library, but we don't have the space or the capacity to do that. And so that's why we want to connect with people who care about it, who might be able to do that. But Dave, I'd be delighted to connect you with Jenny. She's in California, so she was on something of a time crunch this summer. And of course, COVID, nobody was really able to do anything. So she put things in storage for safekeeping until such time as conditions allow us to be together and to look at that.
Oh, thank you, Beth. Appreciate it.
Yeah, nice to see you.
You could probably find Dave's contact info on the PRJC website, but also I will send a follow-up email out about this tomorrow, and feel free to send me something I could forward to him too, if you'd like, if that's easier.
We've got your connection.
And we're still members, right?
Oh, are you still members?
I'm not positive if we are. I haven't even looked at that this year.
You should be.
Membership secretary.
What's your last name? I'll tell
That's
you.
more.
Many of our members are your members anyway. Right?
It's a big family.
It's just a family.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that. That'd be great.
Thank you. To Reuben, I just want to say I had an experience similar to yours. I knew Felix. I had the honor of being on the air with him 2 or 3 times. But the first time I met him was when I was right out of college in the mid '70s, and I was looking for a jazz job and was maybe going to get into radio, which I did, not as a profession, but I did do some broadcasting for a good number of years on WPFW. But my initial bath in the radio world, after listening to Felix in the evenings, was I wrote him a letter and said, "Do you have any contacts or suggestions for me?" And of course, being Felix, he said, "Come on down to the station."
See, yes, yes.
And so I went down to WMAL one night, and he just sat me right next to him, and talked to me all night, and I got to watch him do his thing, and gave me some tips and everything. It was just the warmest.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Very similar. Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
His
Yeah,
wife,
he was so approachable and generous, to be redundant, but you don't forget those things.
Right.
he gave not only to UDC, but he gave albums to several. I mean, to the library in Jamaica, where Melba Liston was. He donated albums there. In fact, the library, I think they named the library there after
They
him.
did, yeah.
And he gave them to the Lorton prison. He gave albums there. He gave some to the DC library. In fact, what happened, I think, sometimes what they would do is when they would put their things on sale when they were, the DC library. Did you ever go to one of the sales that they would have, the DC library, when they would put things out and sell them? And I think people thought they were coming from the archives, from the jazz archives. I said, no, we don't. They must have been from another place where Felix had given, had donated materials. But he was very generous. Yeah. Very generous at this time. Any other questions?
Any others? This has been really great, really interesting learning more about it and how to access it, and such a fun, connection amongst people. I've really enjoyed that. Any other questions before we wrap up? Don't want to cut anybody off, double checking. All right, well, again, I will probably tomorrow. My life is a little crazy, but I will kind of edit the dead time off the beginning of this and load it up onto YouTube, and I'll email probably tomorrow a link with that, and then any of the other things that Judith wants to contribute to point people toward the archives and things that you can take all the time in the world to peruse, listen to, watch. I mean, it sounds like there's just so much on there. So it's really exciting. So check your email boxes for that, and keep your eyes peeled for our upcoming stuff. If you're interested in the trad jazz world, we're happy to have you.
All right.
I want to say thanks to Judith and to Reuben for preserving this music.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ellie, for setting this up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you all for this evening. Yeah. It's just in me. It's just in me, I'm thankful. So I'll just say, I was that kid. My friends would come over to listen to records, and we'd listen to like the top 40 stuff, but I would always yank out something that drove them crazy. Like I'd say, oh, well, like there might be some record by the Supremes, and I'd say, yeah, if you flip over like the B-side, there's like a harpsichord in the fifth bar, and they just go like, oh. So see, to have met people like Felix and you all, it's like my nerddom, and I say this was not in vain, because I knew music grabbed me very early and said, okay, let's go. And it's taken me down these really interesting paths. And as I said before, to make this material available for people who love it and who want to, continue to spread the word is, it sounds hokey, but I'm sincere. It's a great honor. And as my yoga teacher likes to say, it's very centering for me to, even to go in now and just, you tell your friends, what'd you do at work today? I worked on some business records from a collection. They go, but I have this glow on my face, and I think this guy's nuts. They're like business records. But it's part of, you all know it's part of the story. So you look at a score, and you have X number of staves, and maybe you're looking at like the third trombone part, but it's beautiful. I'm thinking, but this is part of the story, and at my age, it's too late to be anybody else. So I'm just glad to be me.
Well, you shouldn't want to be.
No, not anymore. What's that old song? Lucky to be me, I guess. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you. We really enjoyed it. Ellie, thank you so much.
My pleasure, and I'll be chatting with you soon.
Okay.
All right, everybody, have an excellent night, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay, everybody, take care.
Bye-bye.